So massive thanks for joining myself, Sam. And I know we're slightly delayed or massively delayed this morning.
All right.
So look, Sam, in terms of the listeners out there who've not come across you, and I'm not sure how, because you're on all platforms, including platforms which I'm not even on. I came off quite quick, to be fair. I went on. I can't even remember the exact name of the platform, TikTok or something.
My favourite moment.
Yeah, so I was on there for about 24 hours, and I got slightly annoyed. But let me just introduce yourself, Sam. So, Sam, your background is as a finance specialist for bond finance.
Yeah.
People may know yourself or Bruce Manwaring.
Yeah.
So you're based in the city, the heart, literally yards away from the monument. And delighted that you're going to be on the panel on the 27th of February.
Happy to be there too.
This coming month. Just to make sure the listeners are aware who else is on the panel. Got the likes of Ben Keenan, who has done some huge, well, he's the construction lawyer for Multiplex, so responsible for negotiating massive deals. We've got likes of Tony Egan, very experienced investor, landlord, moved into the commercial space. Although we're not going to talk just about commercial in this video, we're also going to move into social housing, but more for that later. So Sam, how would you describe yourself? Because you also come from a construction background, or your father does, and you understand development as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you already mentioned about me pushing myself on social media. Obviously, I'm talking about that on the 27th as well. I sort of, my tagline is the property investor's broker, because I just focus all my attention on investors and developers. And you're right, I had quite an interesting sort of background in terms of how I got into development finance, commercial finance, and working with investors. Was the fact that my dad was a builder, and we decided, because obviously the timing was perfect, in 2010 to buy a bungalow and develop it. My dad being a builder, me being in finance, we thought it was a match made in heaven. And I lied to my dad at the time and told him that I knew how to raise development finance. I didn't have a clue at all. So it was a real baptism of fire for me to try and go out and find that. We actually, in the end, used investor finance for it, because we were quite fortunate. But that's where I kind of learned. I'd been a broker doing residential mortgages and things like that for about 3-4 years previous, but it was at that time that I suddenly thought, this is the part of the market I really want to be in. So since then, I've been really pushing myself as somebody who works primarily with investors, anything from buy-to-let mortgages, HMOs, service accommodation, social housing, that sort of thing, all the way through to development projects, commercial finance, bridging, all that sort of stuff. So if you ask me to do someone's own main residential mortgage at the moment, I'll probably chuck you over to Pete, my colleague in the office, who is an absolute genius when it comes to those things. I like to concentrate and have a bit of tunnel vision when it comes to working with my investor clients.
And I know for the commercial summit that it's going to be Callum instead of yourself. I think you're away for that period of time. So
yeah, off finally.
So just a couple of quick questions, because what really excited me, of course, before doing a video interview, I always just go through what we're going to cover, but what really got to my attention straight away, partly because I haven't put it into the agenda for 2020, and you talked about it being one of the key trends, and I'm thinking, okay, that's interesting. Maybe I could put that into the monthly agenda, have monthly events, Central London, London Bridge Hotel, normally on the fourth Thursday, is social housing. Why, Sam, do you think it's so important? When you say social housing, look, my focus has been much more on the developer side in the last few years. It's Central London's open to all strategies, but I would say it's definitely skewed more to the developer side, and recently to the commercial side as well. Why social housing?
Yeah, well, I think, well, first and foremost, I think it's been around for a while. This isn't a new strategy, but I think with the advent of sort of Section 42 and various other things, I think, in property investors are some of the most creative people out there. People forget that sometimes. And what investors have had to do in recent years is think a little bit more creatively when trying to think about what to do with either their existing portfolio or new properties that they're looking to buy, because obviously some of the some of the tax situation has changed, and they've had to kind of try and make more from the properties that they have. And the idea of possibly renting properties that they already have or new ones that they're going to acquire to local housing associations that rent them out to various other people themselves, that could be either short term or longer term, can be quite a nice way of making the most, I think, out of the portfolio you've got, or new properties you're bringing on board, because those housing associations a lot of the time take over the running of that property, so the maintenance bills and management bills are not something that needs to be covered by the owner, by the landlord anymore. So it can be quite a nice way of increasing your profits, but also with Article 4, which is sort of spreading its wings or tentacles, depending on how you want to look at it, across the UK as well. Local housing associations don't necessarily have to adhere to the same kind of rules that us as normal landlords would have to do. So renting a property as an HMO in a Article 4 area would now need planning permission. In certain instances, local housing associations don't need to get that planning permission. So if you did have, say, a 3-bedroom house in an Article 4 area, or an area that's going to be becoming Article 4, I know Birmingham's becoming an Article 4 area in June, July this year, it means that you can actually hand over your property, if you like, as a 3-bedroom house. They can take the sofa out the living room, put another bed in there, and get you a higher rent with none of the hassle of having to go through planning or having to get licenses, etc. So it's just a way, I think, of being a bit more creative. Us as brokers, we've got to try and fight with the lenders to get as many lending options as possible. And not to say that there's loads, but there's certainly enough to make it a very viable option going forward. And I'm a big fan of the strategy. I think it really does create more of a passive income than maybe just being a standard landlord is as well. So I just think it's got a bit of a stigma attached to it, insofar as people don't like the idea that they're maybe renting their properties to certain types of individuals that they wouldn't do normally. But if they can get their heads around it, I think it's a good strategy.
So Sam, so you see that as being hot in 2020. What else do you see as being hot in 2020? Is it more developer, more commercial? Is it specific commercial?
I think on the sort of the more development side, I think the building to rent rather than building to sell is becoming much, much bigger. We mentioned this, I think, briefly at the development summit as well, when Bruce and I were doing the presentation, where we are finding last year and the year before, because of the way that the sales market was, we were finding that a few clients of ours were having issues selling their development units and were sort of forced, if you like, into renting. And so we had to come up with some creative strategies in order to help them do that. Now what we're looking at, I think, this year and probably next year as well, is even though the market is, I think, improving in terms of sales, I think what the issues that have been caused in the last couple of years, where people haven't been able to sell, has actually opened a lot of developers' eyes and ears to the idea of actually keeping some of these units. And I've certainly got a couple of clients at the moment that I know usually are, they build to sell, and now are building specifically to rent those properties. And we're looking at refinance options post, once practical completion has actually been put in place, how we can then actually refinance individual units, and how we're creating leases and splitting titles and all that kind of stuff. And that's actually becoming, I think, part of the strategy from the beginning. And I say a lot, whenever you're doing these kind of things, start with the end in mind. I think when these developers are starting with the end in mind, what they're actually doing now is they're starting and they're thinking, right, okay, I want to rent these properties for a little while, and maybe what I'll do is I'll periodically sell them on. And instead, they're instead of thinking about just selling them, they're putting things in place, such as making sure that the companies that they're setting up to actually do the development within are right for being able to refinance at the end, because they're not trading companies, they're actually there as special purpose vehicles instead, which helps with greater lending options at the end. So I think that's going to be another big thing over the course of this year. I think building to rent rather than building to sell. I think we're going to see a ton more of that as people are looking to find alternative ways to combat maybe a bit more of a stagnant property market.
So Sam, look, people can reach you on social media in a number of different ways. You're very
Yes.
active, and I know you're going to do a short presentation on how you've built your profile online. It's also about how you've been consistent online as well. So it's not just a 1 week or a 1 month, you've been consistently online. What will be some of the takeaways from that presentation? Oh,
Lost you. Back. I'm back.
We're back.
Yeah, someone tried to call me, and I've got it on Do Not Disturb. I don't know why it did that.
Okay.
Sorry.
So, in terms of how people can connect with you, I mentioned that you're online, quite active, quite consistent as well. How have you managed the consistency issue? Because we've all got busy lives.
Yeah, I think it's just about putting time aside for it and actually making it important. For me, I know that I'm quite happy to wake up quite early in the morning and I can go to bed quite late at night. So a lot of the time, in terms of engaging on social media, I know that for an hour in the morning when I wake up and from an hour in the evening before I go to bed, that won't work for everyone, but I know for me, that's a really good time for me to be engaging with comments and followers and various other things. So, having time set aside to actually use it and making that decision that I know it's important, I know that it's something I need to do. I might not see, the instant results of it, but it is, like you said, it's consistency and building things up over time, and engagement is such a massively important part of that. So putting some time aside, it's silly. Even if you go for a walk around the block in the morning as a coffee break or a smoking break, just whipping out your phone and typing some bits and pieces out on LinkedIn or coming up with an idea for a post on Instagram. It's just finding that time throughout the day to do it. And if you really want to ramp it up to the next scale, actually planning content out. It's something that I've been really looking into more recently, is looking at the weeks and months, thinking about how much content you need to be putting out there in terms to get the kind of engagement that you want, and actually planning that in. And at any one time, Instagram's probably my pillar. It's my main focus where I put a lot of my content out there. At any one time, I've got 2 or 3 draft posts ready. So that if I do have, say, a lazy Sunday and I don't really want to do anything, I know I don't really have to think. I can just go on, and at the right time of day that I know that my followers are on social media, on Instagram in particular, I can click the post button, and it's just there, ready and waiting. So I think preparation
that's a useful tip, because I have to admit, Sam, I never knew you could do that with Instagram, in terms of creating drafts and then posting it.
Most of them you can. I'm trying to think. TikTok you can't, which is annoying for me because that's my favorite at the moment. But I'm pretty sure LinkedIn, Facebook, even Twitter possibly. But Twitter, to be honest with you, is more sort of just constant, just putting your thoughts out there. So putting drafts on Twitter probably isn't the best thing. But certainly on the other main platforms, you can certainly just build up your drafts. So if you've got a Saturday when you're not doing anything, why not spend a couple of hours putting some ideas down for various different types of content and just creating some drafts that you can over the course of the week be posting. Because I think there is a big you've got sort of 2 camps. One sort of say the quality is the most important thing. The other camp would say you just need to be putting the quantity out. I think why not both? I'm a great believer in the guy that the person that shouts loudest gets noticed. And so if you are putting out more content than one of your competitors, for example, you're likely to be the one that gets that attention over them, because you're the person that they're going to be seeing consistently. And I certainly I'm a big advocate of that. I try and post as much as I possibly can, even if it is just something stupid like putting a story on Instagram to say I'm going for a haircut. It's still my face, and when they go through to my profile, they're still going to see what I actually do. But it might just be that a quick 7-second story about me being scared to go and have my haircut is the one that gets someone's attention enough for them to click on my profile and follow me or whatever it might be. So I'm a big fan, I think, of.
Oh, Sam, your phone's going off again.
Look,
I just want to say a massive thanks for taking time out today, Sam. I know we're probably going to get interrupted again. It shows social media workings for you. Your phone's buzzing.
Yeah.
We're going to catch up on the 27th of February, Central London Property Network. So if you want to discuss what's hot in property in 2020 and beyond, join us on the panel. Got the likes of yourself, Sam. We've got Laura Gomez from Ronald Fletcher Baker Solicitors, who's also doing a short presentation on social media. Tony Egan, who's going to do a presentation on commercial property, and also joined by the master negotiator himself, Ben Keenan. So massive thanks, Sam, and massive thanks to the listeners out there.
No problem at all. Always good to speak to you, Brendan.
Thank you.